Hey everyone, Trisha Turinskis here. Today we are doing something different on The Vault. Normally we cover cold cases from decades ago, but there's a story unfolding in North Dakota and Minnesota right now that I think you could maybe help out with. It relates to the homicide case of a 25-year-old West Fargo woman, Isadora Wengel, who went missing on New Year's Eve. What started as a missing persons case quickly turned to a homicide investigation, and her boyfriend, 21-year-old Joshua Hite, has been arrested for her murder. Her body, though, has not yet been found. We'll get to the specifics of this case in just a moment, but this is important to know. Law enforcement officials are asking people who live in or are traveling around Ottertail County, Minnesota, to keep their eye out for a 27-gallon black tote with a red lid. Specifically, they believe this tote could be found in and or around Fergus Falls, Battle Lake, or Elizabeth, Minnesota. Now, why a black tote with a red lid? They believe that the tote could contain her remains. Fargo Forum reporter Tasha Carvel has been covering this case. I talked with her to gain more insight about the whole story, starting from the beginning. And I do want to warn you, the details of this story are incredibly heartbreaking and disturbing. Please keep that in mind as we move forward. And I do want to take this time to say this is a case unfolding in real time, with real people experiencing a grief many of us will never understand. We are highlighting this story for awareness. Here's Tasha.
We know now that on New Year's Eve, a friend of Izzy's picked her up at her father's house to go to a New Year's Eve party, and Joshua Hite picked Izzy up from that party and apparently brought her to his apartment in South Fargo. So police interview Josh Hite at 5 p.m. on the 7th, and on the 8th, they go to his apartment building and they see that garbage has not been picked up from outside the house for quite some time. It's an overflowing dumpster outside the apartment. And an investigator asks for a clean garbage truck to be sent to that location and for that load to be brought to the landfill. And on that day, the police searched that garbage and they found a number of suspicious and disturbing items in the garbage. And of course, it's the whole apartment's garbage dumpster. But in the garbage, they found a lot of towels and bath mats and some plastic sheeting, all of which had red orange material on it, which was later determined to be blood by the state crime lab. At the time, it sure looked like blood, but they didn't know for sure. But later, they were able to determine that it was blood. And then even later than that, they were able to determine that it was Izzy Wengel's blood.
Law enforcement had grown suspicious of Hite even before the dumpster search. He was called into the Fargo Police Department on the day the missing persons report was filed by Isadora's family. This is what he told investigators. And I'm taking all of this information from Tasha's reporting in the Fargo Forum. Hite said he and Isadora went out to eat at a Chinese restaurant in Fargo at some point between New Year's Eve and January 5th. On January 4th, he claims they got into an argument and broke up. The following day, on January 5th, he said he drove Isadora back to her home and dropped her off. From there, he said he went to work at the Moorhead Center Mall. After work, he said he realized she left her phone in his car, so he dropped it off at her house and left it on the deck. There were holes in that story, though. Surveillance footage did catch Hite driving to Isadora's home early on the morning of January 5th, yes, but nobody got out of the vehicle before he drove away. Phone records also show he was accessing her phone throughout the day, too. At this point, law enforcement had enough probable cause to obtain a search warrant for his apartment. So, while they waited for the DNA results to come back, they got to work.
Yeah. The next day, they applied for and received a search warrant for Joshua Hite's apartment and home based on what they had found in the garbage. They were able to do a DNA with that search warrant, a DNA swab on Joshua Hite, and then they also examined him. He was found to have cuts and scratches sort of all over his body, some bruising. And they also found in his house quite a few things that matched some of the things that had blood on them in the garbage. So they found plastic sheeting, duct tape, a number of other sort of blue latex gloves, a box of blue latex gloves. So, that was during that search warrant. They also found a receipt from Home Depot for a number of things, including a black tote, a 27-gallon black tote lid, and some other sort of items like that. Let's see, extra large trash bags, looking at my notes here, a putty knife, some spackle, like wall spackle, some cleaning things, a lot of other sort of things of that nature. So they find that in the house, and then that's what happens. And then they searched the landfill for a few days after that. They were continued to go through that garbage.
They did not find anything at the landfill, but during a search of Joshua Hite's phone, officials noted his online search record, which was problematic. It included searches for a saw, a query for junk removal near me, and information on registering for a legal alias. All of this was from January 4th, during which time he deleted Isadora's photos from his phone. Then, on January 10th, law enforcement received the results from the lab, matching the blood found on items in the dumpster to Isadora. That is when the case officially turned from a missing persons case into a homicide investigation. Joshua Hite was formally charged with her murder, and law enforcement held a press conference where they revealed even more disturbing results from the lab.
And it was the first time they said, we don't believe Isadora is alive any longer, and that the man we've arrested, Joshua Hite, 21-year-old Joshua Hite, heinously murdered her. That was the words the police chief used. That's their belief based on the evidence collected so far. And they said that Joshua Hite had two of these 27-gallon, very big black totes with red lids, very specific, delivered to his home in the days that Isadora was missing somewhere, and when they searched his home, they found one of those black totes, but the other black tote was missing. And based on what they had found with the saw blade, and that analysis came back from the UND pathology lab sometime around the press conference, which said that the material inside the teeth of the saw blade was things like human tissue and bone. So what the chief said, and he used this word, we believe there was some dismemberment involved. So they believe, they haven't said this exactly, but that she could be found in that tote potentially, or parts of her could be. So they've asked people from West Fargo all the way to Ottertail County in Minnesota to be on the lookout for this tote.
You might be wondering, how did Ottertail County, located roughly an hour away from Fargo, come into play? I certainly wondered that too. Joshua Hite graduated from Battle Lake High School in 2022, so he did have a strong connection to the area. But there is more to it than that.
And the reason they are asking people all the way, over an hour away from Fargo, to be looking for it is because in their investigation, they had, first of all, Joshua Hite is from Battle Lake and in southwest Ottertail County, not far from Fergus Falls, and had spent time there, quite a bit of time there. We have him, he has only one criminal conviction on his record prior. It is a it is a minor in consumption in Fergus Falls in 2024. So that is an area he was still sort of around and in fairly recently. So presumably they were sort of searching, but also what they found was a hit on the car that Josh was driving, which is his father's car, but he had been borrowing. And his father said he had gotten the car back to Josh. Josh had used it on and off around New Year's and into the early January days. But his father had gotten the car back to Josh on January 4th at 8 p.m. So Josh has this, it's a Suburu Impreza, and law enforcement got a hit on that license plate just before 5 a.m. at 4:54 a.m. In Fergus Falls on January 7th, which would be the day that she was reported missing. But this would be right before, right before 5 a.m. That car, they don't know, they can't prove that I think right now that Hite was in that car, but that car was in Fergus Falls just before 5 a.m.
So just before Isadora's family officially filed the missing persons report, Joshua Hite got into his dad's black Subaru Impreza and drove down to Fergus Falls in the middle of the night. That's roughly 6 days after she was last seen by friends and family. So what happened in those 6 days?
The charging document says they believe she died sometime between January 3rd and January 5th. That's when they believe she died. So this would have been, 2 days after they believe she died, but presumably, if he was trying to figure out what to do with her body, and he had gone there to try and dispose of it. What the police have been saying is a couple of things. During the time she disappeared and during the time during which they think he might have tried to get rid of her body, there was a lot of snow and it was very cold. Mm-hmm. There has been some melting since then, some sort of significant, there was a pretty significant warm up in early February. The chief said maybe somewhere he buried that tote and the snow has melted now.
Yeah.
And people could find it now, or it could be, sticking out where it wasn't before or something like that. So I think that there was some belief that that's why they wanted the public to be, involved. And it's, the chief has said this, and Chief Dave Zabolski in Fargo has said this a number of times. It's such a big area. And they have done lots of searches. And he said that they search every day. The police department, as of last week, he told me they've been searching still every day. But, it's such a large area. They're going to need the public's help here.
This is where you all come in. If you are listening to this and Isadora's remains have not yet been found, and you or someone you know is going to be in Ottertail County, keep an eye out for a large black tote with a red lid. And if you do see one, do not touch it. Call authorities immediately. They'd rather you call and it be a false alarm than interfere with evidence. Because, while Joshua Hite has been charged for her murder, homicide cases are tough to prosecute without a body. And for those of you actively wanting to get involved, to do more, there is a group of people who have been organizing searches in Ottertail County. You can find information on search parties for Isadora by following the Facebook page, Bring Isadora Wengel Home. I'll provide a link to that page in our show notes, along with links to Tasha's coverage. If you know anything about the murder of Isadora Wengel, contact the Fargo Police Department at 701-235-4493. You've been listening to The Vault, a Forum Communications podcast. If you're looking for a simple way to support the work we do at The Vault, leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts. Reviews boost visibility, which means more coverage for the cases we cover. I'm Trisha Tarinskis. As always, thank you for listening.